pleasure to welcome you to the 14th Jaipur Literature Festival, protected by Dettol. Our session today is My Name is Malala, Malala Yousafzai, in conversation with Pragya Tiwari. Nobel Peace Prize winner and best-selling author, Malala Yousafzai's journey has been nothing short of extraordinary. From being an education activist in the Swat Valley in Pakistan to her path-breaking work with the Malala Fund, she has emerged as an international voice in the fight for education for all and ending gender discrimination. Her latest book is We Are Displaced, My Journey and Stories from Refugee Girls Around the World. In a conversation with Pragya Tiwari, she gives us an inside look into her inspirations, journey and roots. Malala Yousafzai is an education advocate, youngest Nobel laureate, Oxford University graduate and co-founder of Malala Fund. At age 15, she was attacked by the Taliban for advocating for girls' education in Pakistan. She won the Nobel Peace Prize for her efforts to see every girl in school. Pragya Tiwari is a journalist who has written extensively on politics, identity policy and culture and edited publications such as Tehelka, The Big Indian Picture and Vice. She currently works as a policy and culture consultant. She is the co-founder and editor of the Indian History Collective. Please do remember to comment by typing it into the comment section. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Malala. Malala Yousafzai in conversation with Pragya Tiwari.
Thank you so much. I have done any number of sessions and I've had the privilege to speak at the JLF for many, many years now. But this session for me is truly special because it gives me the pleasure and the privilege to be speaking with Malala, who, beyond all the extraordinary work that she's doing and the journey she's had, just by being herself, gives women and girls all over the world, including me, so much joy, so much hope, so much inspiration, and so much courage. And God knows, women all over the world, even those who live with at least some amount of privilege like myself, need all of these things to keep going every single day. So thank you, Jaipur Literature Festival, and thank you, Malala, for being here.
Thank you so much, Pragya, and thank you to Jaipur Literary Festival for giving me the opportunity to speak.
You know, Malala, there are so many things that when I was thinking about this session, you've done so many interviews and there's so many things that are utterly remarkable about your life. And I was wondering, where can I begin to talk to you about your story? And perhaps because I'm a writer, the thing that stood out the most for me is the fact that you seize the opportunity to tell your own story. You know, that is such a huge thing, because for so many women, so many girls, they are not able to tell their own story in their own words. And that's what you did with I Am Malala, which was your first book. And then you took it a notch further by telling the story of girls, young women all over the world who have faced or who are facing a similar predicament that you had faced. I want to know what it was like for you to be able to tell your own story and what you wanted to achieve with your second book, where you introduced us to all of these young women who normally remain hidden behind statistics.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Pragya, for such a warm welcome. Your words mean a lot to me. Yes, you know, I was a young girl in Swat Valley in Pakistan, and in 2007 till 2009, I could not go to school because of extremism, terrorism. There was difficulty, and even when I used to walk to school, there was always fear. I sometimes had to hide my books under my shawl to pretend that I was not a student. And at one point, education for girls was officially banned by the Taliban. So it was a difficult journey. And then when I started speaking out, I was attacked for raising my voice. And I decided to share my story because that is what happened. And that was the truth. And for me, it is crucial that we make sure that we secure this part of history, that we tell our stories, because before we even know it, they are erased, and nobody ever knows what happened. And people in these situations suffer. They lose their loved ones, they lose opportunities in their lives, they lose their homes, they become displaced, they become internally displaced or externally displaced. They face these barriers, and then if you do not tell these stories, they're just lost. So for me, it was important to tell my own story, but also remind people that my story is not unique. This is the story of millions of girls who do not have access to education, who cannot go to school either because of early child marriages, because of poverty, because of cultural norms, because of wars and conflicts. And I was able to travel around the world after the incident. I was honored, and I was uh, so lucky that I got the support of people globally all around the world, including India. I was receiving so many cards and letters and online support from people that I thought now this is the time that I speak not just for myself, but girls around the world who do not have access to education. And in that travel and in that time, I realized that there are girls all around the world who are facing difficulties in their education. There are 130 million girls who cannot go to school. And in these countries, Pakistan, India, and Nigeria are on top in the out of school girls. And uh, I have been to many refugee camps, and I have met these girls who have been displaced from their homes. There are 80 million people who are displaced, who are either refugees, who are internally displaced. And as you mentioned, the way that it is told to us is that these are just numbers, these are just statistics, and we never get to see the human stories behind these numbers. So I decided to write this book, We Are Displaced, to tell the stories of these young girls who lose their homes and who decide to become refugees, to become displaced, to have a safe future. And they usually do not have an option. They are pushed by the situation that they're living in to lose their homes and to find safety somewhere else.
When you Google this book, the first thing you'll probably read is that this is a book about young women who have become refugees. Mm-hmm. And that's not wrong. But even so, you decided to call the book I Am Displaced. And thereby you make this sort of fine distinction between a refugee status and those who are displaced. Why is that distinction important? Why is it important for you that people understand this fine distinction?
I think it's crucial to make the distinction of refugees and IDPs, internally displaced persons, because when we talk about the number in the people who are currently displaced or refugees, it's huge. It's in millions, based on what data tells us. And oftentimes, we hear about people migrating, becoming refugees from one country to another, but many people don't know about the people who are displaced within their own countries. I was one of them in Swat Valley. It was in May or April 2009 that the people of Swat became internally displaced. And I remember, we were in these long car and journeys, and we just did not know where we were going to go. And because some of the roads were blocked by the Taliban, we could not go to our village straight away. So we had to go through another route through Peshawar and that area, and stayed with one guest one night, and then stayed with another friend of ours another night. And it's because of the hospitality of that Pashtun region that a lot of people were welcomed by people in these other cities and other villages. Like, they did not even ask you, where you are from and if they knew you or not. It's just a hospitality that people said, like, yes, you are welcome. You don't have a home, but we have a space and home here, and we will let you in, even if it means we will not have a space within our own house. Like, we can, but we need to make sure that we follow our customs and our traditions. And so there's that internal displacement. And the people of Swat, they were displaced for 3 months. So we were able to go back to Swat Valley in July 2009, the sort of the end of July, beginning of August. And when we went back, the buildings were destroyed, and you could see bullets and walls, and things had changed a lot, but at least peace was restored. But in those 3 months, I remember like just the level of uncertainty that you have to go through. You cannot find a job. You are relying on aid, on the support that you are getting in refugee camps, or the people who are hosting you, or some of your relatives in the other cities. And you don't know if you should settle in or not and try to find a job, because once you do, it means you have decided that you will not return to your hometown. It is just all the confusions that you have to go through. But if you are displaced, or if you are a refugee, you love your home and you miss your home and you always want to go back. And that was what was in our heart as well. I wanted to go back to Swat Valley and I wanted that normalcy. But it's one of the toughest decisions ever, even just packing your bag when you are leaving your home. Like, what should you take and what should you not? And I wanted to take my school bag, and my mom told me not to, because she said we have so many other things to pack, like clothes and shoes and just the basic things that you need as a human. You're thinking about shelter, you're thinking about something to cover your feet, something to cover your body. And I was really sad that I had to leave my books behind. And when I went back to Swat Valley, those were the first things that I checked. I was like, is my bag and are my books safe or not? But in this book, I have covered many refugees. And it's, you hear stories of these young girls who have traveled from one country to another to find safety and protection. And oftentimes, people become refugees because of wars and conflicts, but there could be other issues as well, such as like climate disasters, floods, that can displace people from their homes.
It's really important that you drew this distinction, also because most people don't seem to realize that internal displacement is often the first recourse for a lot of people who are facing distress. But the other thing is that, there's such a lot of sort of anti-migrant, anti-refugee sentiment, which is sort of also politically drummed up and ideologically sort of orchestrated in different parts of the world, including in India. Now. And the sort of common trope is that, these are people who are coming just because they want more prosperity. And in doing so, they're draining us of our resources and challenging our sort of, cultural traditions, etc. And of course, there are so many problems with this construct. But for me, I think what was really special is in the way in which you really evocatively remind people that, and demolish this trope by showing us how nobody ever wants to willingly leave home. I mean, even if the people sitting in rich countries imagine that, we have nothing, no attachment to our homes because we live in less fortunate countries, we would trade the whole world for the corner of the world that we belong to, right? And the other thing that you really managed to eke out is the amount of grit and courage it takes, especially for young women, to be able to make these journeys. I mean, obviously, if they had a choice, they wouldn't subject themselves to it. I want to know, Malala, you've been through so much in life. I want to know what home means to you today. I can see that beautiful photograph behind you. When I say home, what is it that comes to your mind?
For me, home is a sense of belonging, and you feel a sense of loyalty and love for that land. And even if it's a house on rent, even if it's a place which is quite small, and even if it's just one room and one rooftop, you still feel like it's yours. And that is the land where you were born. That is the land where you grew up. And you have that sense of attachment. It is very difficult to explain, but you are even willing to sacrifice so much of your belongings, of yourself for it. And this is very much known about like the Pashtun people, that they're known for their bravery and courage, and they care a lot about where they come from and about their land and their identity. So like when I came to the UK, and initially for me it was like a temporary stay, and I did not want to feel like I'm here permanently. And even now, like, I have this sense of feeling that it is my second home now, but I will go back to Pakistan one day, and I will be working there, I will be living there. So it is very difficult, because you have a sense of security when you think about your home, because you feel like that is somewhere where you can be yourself and nobody can challenge you and call you an outsider or call you like a foreign person. But I think, but at the same time, I also feel that people need to understand the idea of these borders, and the sense of belonging, and how we have just how we have just dehumanized this idea of people making very difficult decisions in their life. Sometimes it could be for economic reasons, for business purpose, could be for just the idea that they want to explore somewhere else, or it could be reasons where you have just no choice but to find safety, and like it could be wars and conflicts. So I think it's important that we understand that it is very complex, and people need to make tough decisions, but it's up to that individual where they feel like, yes, they belong to this new place. And there are many people now who love their home, who love their home country, but they have also settled in like countries like Canada, the US, UK, Singapore, Australia, and they also have built that home for themselves there as well. So it's important that we respect that. And I think it's difficult, but yes, you can have more than one home, and you can. I think it would be it is a nice world where you feel you belong to more places than just one. That you are welcomed in many more places than just one.
For a lot of people, Malala, your story begins where you were the subject of a very brutal and dastardly attack. And, you had a touchwood miraculous recovery from it. But when I was reading your story, I think what struck me most was you as a young child, very, very young child, before you were shot at, um, going from place to place within Pakistan, within the valley, and this is an area besieged by the Taliban, and speaking about why education is really important. You didn't have today you have a couple of resources, you're well known, there's some amount of security that you can call your own. But back then, you were just a very young child. And your father talks about how he would ask you not to say the word Taliban, but you wouldn't stop. You would name them, you would shame them, you would call them out. I have, while reading that, I wondered, it's always women, mostly women, I won't say always, who are called upon to have extraordinary courage in order to be able to do small things, like even educate themselves, right? But for each of us, courage comes from a different place. Where did your courage come from, and where does it come from today?
I think for me, it was as simple as that I wanted to go to school and I wanted to get my education. And for me, just the idea that I was living in a peaceful place, Swat Valley, which was known for tourism, just suddenly became a place of terrorism. Women were restricted to their houses, they were banned from going to markets, girls' education was banned, more than 400 schools were destroyed. And just like some random men with guns make an announcement on a radio saying that a girl cannot go to school, I was unable to process that. And I remember waking up that morning, and I realized that I just could not go to school. And for me, it was not just about being deprived of a classroom, a table, a chair, and a teacher, and reading books. For me, it was about my future, because I knew that when a girl is deprived from her education, it means that she is more likely to get married at early age. She's more likely to be involved in domestic child labor. She's more likely to become pregnant at teenage. She's more likely to not be able to take care of herself, her health, her mental health, and so it affects her individually, but then it also affects the whole society, because when women and girls are not educated, uh, on the level of the economy, the country is losing, because women are an important resource and part of society. They can create jobs, they can contribute to the economy, they can help us create a more educated society that is healthy, and that is protected against climate change, that is protected against wars, and poverty. So and also, like many women, they, if they drop out of school at early age, then they are dependent on other family members, from their father oftentimes to then their husband, and even when they get divorced and things like that happen, they are back to be dependent on their father's family or brother's family. And it's just that whole cycle, and I think it's a burden on everyone. Like, why are you stopping women, and then just created this sense that now a woman is burden on everybody because you didn't allow her to get educated in the first place. So it's just, I think there are these costs of not sending girls to school, and that's what was in my mind when I could not go to school. That that something has to be done. So I don't know if people call it courage, bravery, or but I think it was simply speaking the truth, making sure that I could go to school and all girls in Swat Valley could go to school. And for me, it was literally choosing between just remaining silent and letting things be as they were, or speaking out and doing my part in helping change the things.
Absolutely. I mean, when you say it, it sounds so intuitive. Why would the whole world want to just pull half their weight? Why would you want to keep half of us behind when we could all, we could all take this, all our countries and societies to a different place? And there's a wonderful report on Malala's website, which kind of really highlights why it is so important for women across the world to be educated, not just because it's their right, it should be their fundamental right, but what would mean for the rest of the world as well. And I urge you to read it. But one of the greatest things that you're doing, Malala, is that most people know that you are obviously campaigning for women's education. In fact, the proceeds of this book that we're talking about, Displaced, is also go towards your fund that works to give access to more and more young women to primary and secondary education. But it's the details that are always fascinating. And yes, you have opened schools, but one of the things that you always had an emphasis on is empowering local leaders, and that to me is fantastic, because you work in so many different places across the world, and there are different barriers to education in different parts of the world. Right? I mean, women could be held behind in India, in Rajasthan for a separate reason, in Karnataka for a separate reason, in Swat Valley for a separate, in Nigeria, Brazil, whatever. Could you tell us a little bit more about your approach, the fund's approach and your approach to providing access to women, young women, to education?
So Malala Fund is working in more than 8 countries, and India and Pakistan are one of them. And our focus is to invest in local educators and activists who are working on girls' education. And as you mentioned, the issues that girls are facing in access to education vary across regions. So we are focusing right now on the north of India. We have more than, I think, 11 champions in India that we are currently supporting. And it's like small things, like, for example, like in the tea plantation side, it's like when girls are involved in the labor, in the work, it's ensuring that we do advocacy there. We bring awareness to remind people how crucial it is that girls complete their education. When there's floodings, access to education for girls becomes more difficult. So ensuring that girls do not miss out because of these natural disasters. And our activists are talking to local leaders, parents, religious leaders, local governments, that they invest in girls' education and they send their daughters to school. But they're also making sure that they keep an eye on the policy and do advocacy for that, because there are policy level changes that are made that impact girls and women, and we need to make sure that our governments and our leaders make ambitious commitments towards girls' education.
Coming to what you're doing with the fund and what you're doing professionally, to something a bit more personal, Malala. Women, of course, across the board face all kinds of barriers at the intersection of economic hardships and gender hardships, and in India, caste, or those kind of things become much magnified. But one of the things that one finds across all kinds of women, that they also kind of face a lot of internal struggle, perhaps because of patriarchy and the way social conditioning is. We are just, we tend to be a little bit more prone to self-doubt, to imposter syndrome, to kind of fearing failure, because oftentimes we have more to prove, right? You are somebody who went through a slightly out of the ordinary childhood. And then the attack happened, and then you kind of became the face of a particular kind of struggle across the world. You were still very young when you sort of shot to fame. And you've continued doing your work, you've continued pursuing an education for yourself. But of course, that doesn't mean things get easy for you, right? Like, you faced completely ridiculous criticism, from all kinds of quarters, and you're also somebody who's kind of, people see you as this person who's critical of, maybe extremism in Pakistan, but you've called out everybody. Like it's not like you've stopped at one thing or the other, including the government in India when Kashmir was going through a crisis, and of course that comes with its pushback. I think it would be empowering for young women and women in general to hear how you deal with stress, how you deal with anxiety, how you deal with sometimes this kind of urge that we have to censor ourselves. How do you cope with that?
If I'm honest, I think it is difficult to make these choices and to make these decisions. We all go through this tension. We see something on social media, we get tagged, and then it is a process, and I'm not going to deny that. But for me, there is always just this one principle, which is to speak the truth, and I make sure that I raise my voice for the causes that I believe in, for women and girls, and always take the right side in history. And I think, like, we all have studied history books, and we all know what has happened in the past, centuries or two, and even before that. And it just shocks us to say, okay, there was Hitler and there was all this crazy thing happening, and what were people doing? So for us, it's like a reminder that whenever such genocides and ethnic cleansing and discrimination is happening, we need to make sure that we stand on the right side and protect those who are vulnerable and voiceless, because before you even know it, you could be the next target. And so you need to make sure that you stand with people who do not have a voice. I will say that when you have nothing to lose, it is easier to speak out on any issue. But when you are in a position where you can do a lot more work, when you can support projects, when you can support other activists, when you can be educating girls because you have access to resources and you have access to doing this work for change, then there's a huge opportunity cost to what you say and what you do. And I think there's just a lot of responsibility, and I do not deny that. So I am more careful now in what I say and in what I do. And but I think for me, it's just important that I do not tell a lie, that I do not, if I can't say what's true, then but do not tell a lie. Just be silent, right? But I also think that it's important that we focus on where the issue is, and focus on the people who are making wrong decisions, that are violating human rights, rather than accusing each other of, okay, you said this, you should have said this, you missed this point, you added this point, I do not like your statement. I think if we are fighting within ourselves, we would not be able to help bring the change that we want to see. So it's important that we remain focused on that, rather than accusing each other. I think it's just not healthy at all. Consider each other as one army of activists. You should not be fighting within. You should be focusing on the fight that you envision for everybody, for the vulnerable, for the voiceless, and ensure that you stay committed to the cause. And both in Pakistan and India and in so many other countries right now, we see that minorities are at risk. Minorities' rights are not given to them. They are discriminated. If it's Hindus in Pakistan and Christians in Pakistan, and then on the other hand, it's Muslims and Dalits and other minorities in India. So I think there's something else going on. It's not religion. It's just the exploitation of power. It's just the elite versus the poor and minorities. So I think minorities need protection globally from every country, to Palestinians uh, to Rohingya refugees. So many people right now in the whole world need a voice, need protection, and I think it's a reminder to governments, to human rights organizations, to take this very seriously. And I think for both Pakistan and India, we need to realize that we are not each other's enemies. Our enemy is poverty, is discrimination, is inequality, and both the countries should unite and fight for the protection and safety of everyone, and make sure that we change the numbers and we change the statistics, and we ensure that we are not known as the countries with the highest number of girls out of school, but countries where all girls can have access to education.
Particularly because our girls are so wonderful and amazing. In fact, I mean, that's not to say that they aren't all over the world, but Malala, for us, you're one of our own. Obviously, we feel in India a greater affinity to you than we would to anyone else. We speak similar languages. We come from the same culture, and there are so many young women today in India who are fighting the good fight. Be it against poverty, discrimination, violence, you name it, injustice. And they're fighting because they want a better world, right, than what they were handed over. But even in a country like India, which has a very robust democracy, we have a situation where young women have to face so much of backlash for being able to stand up. And backlash at so many levels, right? Like starting from your family, from internally to family, society, government, state, police, no matter what have you. So because you've been doing this since you were a child, I feel like it would be very, very empowering for young women in India to hear from you. What message would you have for activists in India today who are struggling with a cause despite all the odds against them?
I think the stories that I hear of Indian girls and young women fighting for their rights and protection, fighting and speaking out for Kashmir and speaking out for farmers in India, for climate change, for the protections of minority rights, I think is truly empowering and inspiring. And it's important that women's voices are heard, but also at the same time, it's everyone's right to protest peacefully, to go out on the streets, to disagree with the policy, and they should not be put in jail just for simply expressing their political opinion. You may not like their political opinion, but it does not mean that you put them in jail and you arrest them. I think it's a democratic right of every individual, including women and girls, that they highlight their political preferences and their political asks. And especially like these days, we hear a lot about the farmers' protests online. And what is really worrying is how there's the internet shutdown, and many children are missing out on their education because of COVID. Students are attending their classes online. So I hope that the government makes sure that the children can continue their education, and that people can protest peacefully and ask for their rights, and that they are heard.
Final question, Malala. There is, I know that you want, for reasons that you mentioned above, as well as personal significance, you want to do a lot for women's education, and that's something you're already well on to doing. But if I was to ask you, what would you like to be able to achieve personally and professionally in this next decade? What would your answer be?
So many things. It's hard to choose one. But
Tell me all.
I always mention that it is my dream to see every girl in school. I've had it since I was very little, and we are very ambitious when we are young. But I also realize that with time we become less optimistic, which is true for several reasons. We see things are not as nice as we had hoped for, and things take longer. But I'm sticking to my goal that we can see a world where all girls can have access to safe and quality education. They can have their rights, and they can dream and they can aspire for anything that they want in their life, and they can be that. And another wish that I have is that that in like both Pakistan and India, they can become friends, and that we can visit each other, see each other, and continue. You can continue watch Pakistani dramas, and we can continue watch Bollywood movies and enjoy our cricket matches. And I think I hope that both these countries can build peaceful relationships. And there has been news recently of ceasefire, so that is a very positive news. And I hope that that we realize that we are all humans, and we love each other. You're Indian, I'm Pakistani, and like we are completely fine. Like, why is this sense of hatred created between us? And I think this old philosophy of like borders and divisions and divide and conquer and all those things, they just don't work anymore. As humans, we all want to live in peace. We want to live together. We want to enjoy the little moments that we all have, that we all can share. There's a lot to celebrate in that, and I hope that in the coming years, Pakistan and India become true good friends, and we see that friendship, globally in all these countries. We can all have peace and just hug each other, spend time with each other when Corona is done and when we are all vaccinated.
Thank you. What can I say? May all your dreams come true, and more power to you. And thank you for everything that you're doing. And thank you for being you. Thank you for speaking with me, Malala. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Over to you, JLF.
Thank you, Malala Yousafzai and Pragya Tiwari, for such a fascinating conversation. We thank our celebration partner, Diageo, and thank you all for watching and being such a great audience. Please stay logged on to continue to watch with us the series of exciting sessions featuring a stellar list of speakers that have been specially curated for you. As you all are aware, the cultural sector has been critically impacted by the pandemic, and while we have braced ourselves to embrace the new normal, we have struggled to ensure that we can continue to bring you a free flow of knowledge and ideas. We would love for you to support us at Teamwork Arts. Any contribution is welcome and would help spread knowledge and ideas seamlessly against all odds. Please tweet using hashtag Jaipur Literature Festival 2021 at Jaipur Lit Fest. The festival is protected by Dettol. Hope to see you in the next session. Thank you.